So this particular video is on section 7.6 on pie charts in your pre-algebra text for CAP 045. And I'm not going to quite go into all the details of 7.6 on how you can use a protractor to create a pie chart. I'd like to more teach you how to do kind of an estimation based upon some basics of thinking about a circle. And if we were to divide a circle up into parts, how much that would be. And so in other words, if I have a center in my circle and I go right across from it, I've split my circle in half, and so I've created two 50% sides. If I half it again, now I've created 25% pieces or quarters, right? 1/2 is the same as 50%, 1/4 is the same as 25%. If I half that quarter, I've created an 1/8, which is 12.5%. And if I half that 1/8, I've created a 1/16, which is half of 12.5%, which would be 6.25%. So those are kind of your rough guesstimates. So if you go slightly less than a 1/16, you're headed into the 5% land. If you go slightly less than an 1/8 of a pie, you're headed into the 10% land. And this kind of can help you create pie charts by just using estimation rather than getting really detailed with a protractor. It'll get you through this section and get you through most problems. So keep those in mind, that a half is 50% of your pie chart, a quarter is 25% of your pie chart, an 1/8 is 12.5%, and a 1/16 is 6.25%. A problem like example 1 on page 554, it asked us to construct a pie chart, and in a recent Gallup poll, 66% of those polled approved of the president's job, 28% disapproved, and 6% were undecided. So let's add these all up to make sure we get 100%. 6 and 8 is 14, plus 6 is 20, carry the 2, 6 and 2 and 2, yeah, so we got 100%. So we know that 28%, that's a little more than a quarter, so we could draw something at a little, just slightly more than a quarter, and that would be 28%, that would be close enough. And then we know 6% is going to be in the kind of that 1/8 of the pie zone. So you could roughly kind of, draw a dotted line up to a quarter, and then if you drew a dotted line over, you'd get an 1/8 of the pie. So that would be about 6% right there. And you could erase the little dotted line that you drew to estimate that. And then the rest of the pie would be the 66%, because all three added together add up to 100%. So that's close enough. Getting out the protractor, detailing every degree to the percentage. I mean, they're talking about there's 360 degrees in a circle, and so you'd have 28% of those 360 degrees. How many degrees would that be? 66% of the 360 degrees. That's okay. You can read through that in your book and learn that. However, using some good estimation skills and just the basics with knowing from your previous slide that 25%, 50%, 12.5%, and 6.25% is going to get you quite a ways. Let's try another one on example 2 on page 556. It says 1,000 people were polled with the question, where does your dog sleep during the night? The responses are shown in the following table. And so they have outside was 30, another room was 220, on the bedroom floor was 330, and on the bed was 120, for a total of 1,000. So we can figure out the percentages of each one of these. We're looking for the P in our A over B equals P over 100 proportion formula in each one of them. So our B is going to be 1,000, and then each one is going to be the amount. So we would have 30 over 1,000 equals P over 100, and we would cross multiply and divide and solve that. And we would get that P equals about 3%, right? 3%. And then we could do Another room would be 220 over 1,000 equals P over 100. We would, oops, sorry, put 1,000 there, I want to say 100. And we'd cross, multiply, and divide, and our P would equal 22%. And then we could do the, on the bedroom floor is 330. We go 330 over 1,000 equals P over 100. We would cross, multiply, and divide, and P would equal 33%. And then finally, there is on the bed, 420, I think I said 120 earlier, I misread that. 420 over 1,000 equals P over 100, lucky dogs. Cross, multiply, and divide, and P is going to equal 42%. And this is detailed in a chart on page 556, in a table, not a chart, but a table. So we have 3%, 22%, 33%, and 42%. If we add those all up, they equal to 100%. So we're going to make a pie chart using those numbers and kind of using our estimation skills. So we could take our pie chart, and we know that a half of it is a half of it, if I drew a dotted line all the way through, that would be 50%. We know we're at 42%, so we're going to need less than that. We got something at 22%, which means we're going to need a little less than a quarter, and then 33% would be a little more than that. And then the 3% is going to be, if we have an eighth is at 12.5% and a 16th is at 6.25%, then a 32nd, right, would be at 3%. So if we did an eighth and then a 16th and then half of that, that little piece is going to be that 3% piece. So we could fill that in. We could erase, let's see, we could fill in with a more solid line for that approximate 3% and erase our little dotted lines. And then at 22% added to 3% would be 25%, so we could fill in that. So there we have our 3% and our 22%, and then I'm going to write 3% down below and point into it. And then we know that we have 42% and 33%, so we know that 25% is a quarter. We got to go over that by about 8%, which is going to be a little more than an eighth, or excuse me, a 16th, right? So roughly right about there, I'm going to draw in, and I would have 33%, so I'm going to erase some of my dotted lines. I'm just doing estimation to get through these. And then the remainder, if I erase my little dotted lines, that's going to be our 42%. And so that gets us close enough. We got 33%, 42%, 22%, and 3%. And so no worries here, just be really thoughtful about, you've got to have it be a little more than a quarter, or a little less than a quarter, or a little less than half, and you'll get close enough to show a pie chart that looks halfway decent for the data, and without having to get really, really detailed. So we had to do some percentage math on that problem in order to get the percentages, and that's what's important. And then we applied it to our estimation skills with half of a circle at 50%, a quarter of the circle at 25%, and an eighth of a circle at 12.5%. Hopefully this all makes sense and you're able to get your way through these problems in a pretty decent fashion. So that's the end of pie charts.